Hello everyone, hopefully everyone's been having a decent Sunday. In today's live stream we'll be playing more 10+0 rapid games. And as usual, I'll leave you guys with this puzzle to solve while I make sure that everything is working technically. As usual, I'll leave you guys with this puzzle to solve while I... This time I'm gonna take even more careful measures to make sure that my microphone is not delayed or the video feed or anything of that sort. So I'm gonna double check. You may hear my voice yet again to solve while I... This time I'm gonna take even more... Okay, I think it's okay. If you guys hear me a little bit delayed, please let me know. So I think this should be plenty of time for you guys to have already solved this one. It's not going to be anything compared to the topics we're going to be talking about, but it serves like a warm-up regardless. Quickly, we realize that this king on h3 is completely naked, and has to be a way of exploiting this. And we've also highlighted the bishop on f6, which to some extent takes part into the attack, not directly, because in this case, for instance, the king is in a light square, but indirectly. And more than that, we start thinking about checks, right? Queen h1 doesn't make sense. That's just a queen sacrifice. And queen h5 is the only other check, and this one happens to be working, because after king g3, only move, we have queen h4, exploiting the fact that this pawn on e4 is very, very conveniently taking away the f3 square of the king, meaning the king has nowhere to go. And once again, this bishop is doing an incredible job at defending the queen. So we're gonna join the rapid arena, and best of luck to everyone. Let's see who's playing with the... Oh, France is dominating the arena so far. And then we have a couple of well, you could say international players. Russia. Wait a second. These two usernames are similar. They're both like 5 letters. Interesting. If you guys are watching this live, thank you very much. Welcome. But if you're watching this after it's over, as a VOD, as a video, you guys can navigate through the games and through everything. It's already mapped through the chapters of YouTube. So you guys can click and fast forward. You guys don't have to wait with me. That's my point. You don't have to wait for me to get a game. We're playing against Rafeka S. We're going to open it with e4 and we're going to get c5. Finally, we're breaking the curse of getting this d6 move 1. As it's been the case with game 1s of the past 3 streams, pretty interestingly. And we're going to follow it up with knight f3. Knight f3 is a very natural developing move, and they go g6. So as many of you already know, in this channel we've been, at least for the last couple of months, we've been using the delayed Alapin as a weapon, as a repertoire, with the white pieces. And they go knight c6. I was expecting d5. But knight c6 is, I'm quite sure, very reasonable. I'm going to go d4. This is the point of playing c3. Then after takes, we don't have to take with the knight anymore. We can play c takes d4. And now black strikes in the center with d5. Whenever I get this position, I have 2 initial thoughts. Either I push, claiming that I'm going to have space, more space than my opponent, or take, or keep the tension. So I lied. There are actually 3 options. The first one is not very good, because black then plays something like bishop g4, plays e6, and imagine this is what we know as a French center. It's reminiscent of the French defense, except for one very important detail, and that is that the light squared bishop is outside the pawn chain. And imagine if the French defense is difficult to play against as white, imagine with that super plus that black would have in that case after e5, let's say bishop g4, black wouldn't be struggling too much anymore. This is essentially the biggest problem of the French players, sorry, of the French position. And if black can solve that, that can't be good for white. So it's not, we're not going to go e5. E takes d5, queen takes d5, only move to not lose simply a pawn. I play knight c3 and I like that because I gain a tempo. But okay, maybe you can make a case for, okay, knight c3 takes. It's essentially the same thing. But I didn't win a tempo. If you guys can visualize that. Imagine knight c3 takes and it's black to play. But if I take, after knight c3, for instance, like black could technically go queen d8. And it's a very similar position, but it's white to play. So all of those things said, e takes d5, we're going to gain a tempo. Chess is a very quick game. You want to keep things flowing. You want to continue with your plan. You want to make the most of your moves, invest them in the best way possible. And that's what more or less we're doing in this small portion of this game. Now black obviously doesn't go back all the way to d8. That would have been too passive. Black chooses the more active queen a5, which makes sense. It's pinning my knight, first of all. But second of all, it's simply putting the queen on a square that is not going to be blocking, for instance, the rook. Let's think about this. So I want to get out this bishop so I can castle. And I essentially have lots of options. I have bishop e2, bishop d3, and bishop c4. Bishop e2 would be designed to parry and anticipate any bishop g4 pinning ideas. But to be honest, I don't think I'm worried about that. I think I'm going to go bishop c4. This is definitely more active. It's creating some tension, a point of contact against the f7 pawn. And for example, if black has to play e6, then this bishop would be not very happy about that. So that's why I'm going to choose for bishop c4. Now I'm going to castle. And you're going to say, well, David, d4 is under a little bit of pressure. What happens after a move like bishop g4? And don't worry, we're gonna take a look at that in the post-mortem. Let me just write this down. Where on earth do I write it down? Okay, I'll remember, hopefully. But if you guys are listening to this, hopefully you can maybe remind me. Black doesn't go for bishop g4, they go for knight f6. And it seems like this is asking for trouble. Because black is one step away from castling. But already I've already finished development, or at least the basic development. I've castled my king. So essentially I'm already in a middle game mindset. I've already finished the opening, these steps you should follow in the opening, which is ultimately castling and putting your king in safety, as I said. And now that I'm in a middle game mindset, I can create and formulate plans. So what is that? Formulating plans is very specific. It depends on the type of position, the type of the middle game you're in. This one happens to be an IQP middle game. This is what we call an IQP middle game. IQP stands for isolated queen's pawn, which is this one on d4. So if you take a look at the structure, very often if you take a look at the structure in a given chess position, that's going to give away and reveal where your plan should be focused on, or give you some sort of hint at least. In this case, the IQP gives you the hint of this is a very sharp. Okay. I'm gonna restrain myself from saying that this is a very sharp position, because many of chess positions are. But the IQP says, look, this is a weakness in the long term, but in the short term, it actually allows my pieces, specifically my rooks, to be open in the C and the E files. It gives me a little bit more of chances of playing d5, which is actually what I'm going to play in this position. My pieces are more active with an isolated queen's pawn. Very often in isolated queen's pawn positions, too, you're the only one that has a pawn in the center. Black, in this case, doesn't have any pawns in the center, so that gives me a little bit more of a chance to limit my opponent's pieces scope, limit the pieces' scope. Okay, give me a second. Here, knight b4 looks a little bit wrong. I was expecting knight b8, knight bd7. But knight b4 looks like it's not creating a threat, first of all, which may be what my opponent failed to see, or may not be, not sure. So for example, after a move like a3, technically my opponent would have to go to a6 if they want to escape with the knight. Now there's a second layer of difficulty in this. After a3, black could technically castle and say, claim, hey white, you're actually not threatening to take my knight because I take your rook. But that queen is looking very unsafe there. So I'm not sure about that. Plus I can also, like after castles, I can play a normal move like bishop f4 and then they ultimately have to go knight a6 regardless. Okay, I'm running a little bit low on time. And I'm gonna actually choose to go for a practical approach, and that is rook e1. Rook e1 is simply designed to discourage castle short side. And I say discourage and not prevent, because after castle short side, yeah, exactly. I think this is a very reasonable approach by my opponent. Sacrificing the pawn. Rook takes e7. Let's just think about this for a second. How much compensation is my opponent getting for the pawn? Well, okay, bishop g4, I go h3. Not completely clear. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take on e7, and from now on, my strategy was based on activity, but now that I'm up a pawn, my strategy is based on consolidating. And what that means is essentially stabilizing the position. Because my main advantage is material, so I don't have to do anything crazy. I just have to survive, right? I just have to make sure that black doesn't have any play. So I'm gonna play boring looking moves, preventing my opponent from activating themselves. Now rook d8, I understand that black is now attacking my pawn on d5 in 1,000 different ways, sorry. But I think I have this move d6. And it's not too much that I'm putting my pawn in a more active square and that I want to play d7. That's actually not at all what I want to do, and my opponent fails to see what happened. The pawn on d5 was simply blocking my bishop. By playing d6, my bishop and my rook are actually working together against the f7 pawn. And as far as I can see, I can take it. Now bishop takes f7, or rook takes f7, or bishop takes f7, king h8, and I have to do something about this rook, so I might as well do something about that rook right away. So I'm gonna take on f7. Black plays king h8, very logical move. And now this looks very scary for black. I can think of many tempting ways of continuing here, like knight g5, preparing some future, quick, I don't know, rook c7, knight f7 ideas. I'm already thinking of sacrificing the exchange because the dark squares are so weak. Bishop g5 makes a lot of sense. Queen e2, simply trying to bring the queen into the game. Tons of options. So I like quoting Korchnoi in these type of positions. Korchnoi said, I can play slightly worse positions, I can play losing positions, I can play drawing positions, but completely winning positions I can't play. And what he meant with that was, we have so many options, and the human mind relaxes almost on automatic. So let's not relax, let's keep the pressure going. I have less than a minute. You guys are gonna see the timer go red now. And that essentially means I have to hurry up and stop talking. So I'm gonna play bishop g5. If at some point of this game I start playing and blitzing moves, don't worry, we will go through them in the post-mortem and the analysis portion of this game. Every single time after a game, we analyze it, whether we lost, won, drew, disconnected, my opponent aborted the game, anything. They play queen f5, very reasonable move. I'm going to play bishop d3. I have to do something quick here. I'm going to play queen d2, simply bringing pieces into the game. Also protecting this bishop with the queen, so moves like knight h4 become an idea. David, why on earth is this coming to your mind? Like, this is not obvious at all. Well, whenever you realize that queen f5 is designed to just protect the pawn. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in the postmortem. I don't want to flag like a complete something. I'm going to go rook e1. I'm bringing everyone into the game. They take on d6, and this looks very... It looks like it should not work, and I'm quite sure it doesn't. And actually, this is the reason, bishop f6. So I wanted to play rook e8, but the knight on f6 was keeping an eye on the e8 square, so I get rid of that knight. Very typical, I mean, very kind of simplistic tactic. And this is simply checkmate, actually. There we go. Very unusual checkmate, by the way. Thank you for the game. Let's take a look at that. So one of the first things that we, kind of the first moments where we paused was in this position. And I'm quite proud or happy to say that, yeah, our logical moves were kind of the top engine moves, like e5 or keeping the tension in some way. But by a big margin, e takes d5 is the best move, by a big margin. So if it's not that, white doesn't have a dominating advantage, but e takes d5 is, yeah, black is already much worse. So what black should have played was either d5 without taking on d4, which looks a little bit weird, but it is simply telling white, hey, because I haven't taken on d4 yet, you can't play knight c3. And this is absolutely fine for black. Black is not worse. Or played d5 already here. But it seems like black played d5 in a suboptimal version. And then we play knight c3, queen a5, and already d5 here would have been strong. But I chose to play the more natural bishop c4, which is a mistake, not because it's giving white a worse position. Okay, it is technically giving white a worse position because white could have had much more. But white's advantage is still pretty overwhelming. D5 would have been even more overwhelming, it would even more dominating. Because already black has to play something like knight b8, and I guess you play bishop c4 now. Yeah, bishop c4 allows some bishop g4 or even... No, actually e6 doesn't, because castles and then d5 is going to come either way. It allows bishop g4. And I was going to claim that I had some queen b3 ideas, but okay, let's not get too much in detail into that, because we do have to go through the remaining part of the game. So yeah, it turns out that after bishop g7, castle short side. Once again, I think queen b3 would... Yeah, queen b3 was stronger. But castle short side is very natural, and it continues to put pressure. It allows bishop g4 though, and this bishop g4 move seems to be holding black's position. But after knight f6, unfortunately, this is already too late. d5, and this position is lost. Objectively lost. If white does everything right, which I'm not sure we did, but I think we followed more or less our hearts to convert this. Go dramatic there for a second. Following your heart. But yeah, our intuition was correct. A3 would have been correct, like the right way. And after castle short side, sacrificing the exchange and playing something like queen b3, and then this queen has nowhere to escape. So there's nothing black can do after a move like bishop g5, and then we're gonna get this queen. Yeah, bishop f4 is the threat, or bishop g5, or bishop e3, or bishop d2. Essentially just moving the bishop and attacking the queen. So, but we went for kind of the secure way, and once again, while we may not be playing in the most accurate way, we are keeping things under control. So white continues to have a very strong advantage. It's still 1.5. Castle short side. Now, this is a mistake. So there we go. This is where we go wrong. We didn't realize that both of our pieces here are unprotected. So queen c5 would have been a very strong move. That would have been forcing queen e2. And when you have to make moves like queen e2, it either works and you're still better as white, or it doesn't. And in this case, it doesn't, because black is having enough power against d5 to take on d5, and then black is actually getting back the pawn. So yeah, I should have played a3 here. And after something like bishop f5, I'm assuming simply knight d4, stopping knight c2. Okay, let's take a look at bishop g4 then. Yeah, now bishop g5 applies, creating the threat of this and forcing knight a6. And then this is better for white because black's pieces are a little bit, specifically the knight on a6, are a little bit more disconnected, uncoordinated, inactive. And against bishop f5, it's important to go knight d4 to stop knight c2 ideas. But rook takes e7, mistake by me. Rook d8, counter mistake by my opponent, and now d6 is completely crushing. And yeah, after this, Rook takes f7 is correct, and then bishop g5 is correct. Queen d2. This is what I was saying here is bishop g5 is creating the threat of bishop 6 f6, bishop 6 f6, and winning even more material. So queen f5 is putting one more defender into that. So one of the first things that I thought about was knight h4, but that's simply dropping the bishop. So that's why queen d2 is threatening knight h4. If black can't find a square to keep an eye on this knight on f6, for example, let's say they play rook b8, horrible move, knight h4, and let's say they go, I don't know, queen a5, just to prove my point. I know queen c5 exists, but I don't want to spend here 1,000 years. But something like this, and we're winning the bishop, if not queen h6 ideas, right? Which I suspect is what happens after this. But black played knight e5, trying to, I guess, anticipate that and like forcing white's hand to take on e5 because everything is essentially a threat. So I have to get rid of that knight, but I'm not complaining. Like after rook e1, we're simply bringing one more piece into the game, and this is simply cashing in everything we've been building up. And white is completely losing. Black is completely losing. So thank you for the game. Let's go back to the arena. I have no idea why the YouTube chat doesn't work. Hello, hello to the waving hand. This is like a Tarash. Hello, Stefan. Hello, Sidorite. Yeah, time. I don't know why on earth the chat. Give me a second. Let me just solve this. I'm gonna make a move. I'm gonna go d6. We may get a King's Indian. Of course, Noise said that. Indeed. Sorry. Yeah, I should have seen these messages. I assumed that the chat did work. Next time I'll address the questions. But for now, I think let's focus on the next game. That's my fault. Okay, bishop f4 is aiming for a London system. But what people get wrong sometimes in this kind of, well, against this setup is that black no longer wants to go for c5 stuff. So I'm gonna castle here. Essentially, we're doing all the King's Indian-ish moves, everything very natural. Sorry. But this time, now we're not gonna make a King's Indian-ish move. We're gonna play actually b6 with the idea of bishop b7. So this is a very passive, very strategical game. You may notice that there's no tension in the center. Like everyone is playing in their territory. So white is restraining themselves to their territory, and the same with black. In fact, black doesn't have a single piece even in the fifth rank. Everything is concentrated at the 3. But that's not gonna be the case for much longer. I'm gonna continue developing my pieces. Although c5 is you can make a case for c5 trying to go for knight c6. I'm not entirely sure about that. I'm gonna play knight bd7 and try to fix the YouTube chat because this is unacceptable. Also, guys, if you're hearing the voice a little bit more delayed, please let me know. Okay. Let's see now. They should appear. Thank you. I mean, it does work as well for me, Stefan, but it should appear on the screen. But I'm not sure why it's not. Maybe it has to do with Twitch, maybe. I know. I think it may be Twitch's fault. Okay. Hopefully it fixes itself. Okay, I'll give up. For now, at least. Yeah, I don't have... I think I'm the only viewer on Twitch. Okay, well... God knows. We almost mouse slipped d5. Okay, white plays c3, claiming this center is going to be super strong to break. And if we quickly flip the position, we get to see and appreciate what white is doing. White is keeping this center very, very solid. And even after, like, even if I prepare rook e8 and e5, white is simply not going to move and be rock solid. So in these type of structures where everything is very close and there's not tons of contact, and even if you create contact with rook e8 and e5, white simply waits. Even in these type of situations, it's just very slow. Just a very slow position. So you have to improve your position little by little. There's not going to be any direct operation, if that makes sense. It's not going to be almost as if, I don't know, king's at attack. Like, that's kind of the last thing you would think, at least for now. Now, as I was saying that, white clearly contradicted their philosophy by playing this whole stuff. So e5, white shouldn't be taking. There's no good reason. That only helps black. Take a look at this. This pawn on d6, not part of the center, right? I mean, it's supporting the center. But after d takes e5, look at this. Now white no longer has a pawn in the center, and I still have. So that doesn't make sense to me. Now, do we want to go e4, or do we want to simply continue with useful moves like queen e7 and rook a d8? I think I want to continue queen e7. The reasoning behind this is, sorry, that I want to go rook a d8, and I didn't see e4 being worth to allow, I don't know, knight d4. I think this pawn on d5 is limiting white to some extent. So I'm going to continue that. I'm going to bring more pieces into the game. Rook a d8. Now essentially I've moved everyone. So these two knights, these bishops are nicely placed in the... Okay, maybe the bishop on b7 is definitely nicely placed. The bishop on g7 is crashing against my own pawn. But it wouldn't be very time friendly to trying to relocate this guy. Like, this bishop on g7 very often comes alive after e4 at some point. But it's as good as it gets. I'm not complaining. And what that means is that once all your pieces are in good squares, then maybe we should start thinking about moving pawns and finding a pawn break, or going for some sort of exchanging minor pieces plan. Or something of that sort. So knight c4 is putting pressure on e5. Obviously, we have to balance all of these things out, and at the same time react to what our opponent is doing. That's chess. Like, there's always a second player doing stuff, and you have to address whatever your opponent is doing. And in this case, it's simply taking a pawn. So what do we do here? First things first, I started thinking, well, is this actually a threat? Or this, or this? And it is, because knight takes e5, for instance, we don't have to calculate every single one of them. Like, if one of them is taking the pawn, then that's good enough for us to move on. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5. White plays knight takes e5, and then we lost a pawn. I don't see any tactics of moving this knight with some sort of tempo, attacking this, sacrificing, rook takes d1. I don't see anything. I tried. So now I'm thinking, well, probably I want to move this knight to unleash or uncover, I should say, the action of this bishop on g7. So this bishop on g7 is now doing a decent job at defending. Obviously, the knight on e4 is defended by my bishop on b7. So no need to worry. And let's see. We are not managing our time very well, but in my defense, I was trying to fix the chat. Which I have no idea. I don't know why these things are happening. Yesterday was I see. I did the wrong one. There we go. Now it works. Let's test YouTube. Well, YouTube takes 1,000. There we go. That was weird. Okay, back to the game. Bishop d3. So bishop d3 obviously is putting pressure on e4. It's creating that, well, what we call a primitive threat, because it's very basic. Yeah, thanks. It's very basic, but still needs to be addressed. So one of my initial reactions was something like knight c5. But then I actually want to reserve this square for the other knight. So I'm thinking of keeping this one on e4 by playing f5. But once again, I'm not sure. Now there are also moves like knight takes f2, because every time I move this knight, there's going to be the threat of e4. So for example, knight takes c3 technically is possible, as long as I follow it up with e4. But I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm going to go for knight c5. Obviously, I'm threatening e4. That's a super threat. So I'm expecting bishop e2, and then I'm essentially saying, look, like after knight e4, you go back to e2 and you didn't make any progress as white. You simply shuffled your bishop back and forth. And in the meantime, I get to, I don't know, maybe it's my turn again, right? That's a good enough for me to choose to go for this. What would Steinitz say? I have no idea what William Steinitz say. Okay, this one looks very wrong. And I think the cleanest way of exploiting this is knight takes e3. There was a case for e4 and potentially do something here, but knight takes e3 followed by e4 seems like a cleaner way. Thanks to this rook on d8, by the way, because if the rook was still on e8, then queen takes d7 would be a threat. So there we go, developing. Now, I have been thinking about what Steinitz would say, and I think he would say something like, I mean, he was crazy towards the end of his life, so I think something along the lines of, I can move pawns with my mind. He believed in electromagnetism or something like that. He thought you could move pawns with his mind, thanks to electromagnet waves or frequencies. But don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. I have to double check my history. I'm not completely sure. So we're up a bishop pretty nicely. And not only that, like there's sometimes where your opponent has tons of compensation in exchange of, I don't know, certain amount of material, but in this case it's simply not. So there are many tempting moves like queen g5 takes, but in this case I think rook c8 is clean because it's pinning the bishop to the knight. So I only see one way of defending that as bishop d6, but that runs into queen g5. Queen g5. Sorry about this. Goodness gracious, I have tons of air. I did come from having a meal, so it's on me. Now bishop g3 is a accurate way of defending. Let's see if our opponent finds it. But bishop g3 I take. Oh, they do find it. We're gonna take on c4. So rook takes d7 is the only logical move, and then I'm not sure if I should go bishop e4. Okay, that one doesn't make sense. Because now I go back. And you're gonna say, David, this rook is, like, you're blundering. Well, that runs into queen takes g2. Keep in mind this bishop actually had to come back to prevent checkmate. So this is nothing to worry about. And at the same time, I'm kind of setting up a sneaky trap. So all of the defense of these pieces seem a little bit clunky. If that's a word. So queen d6, bishop e5 would have happened in the game. We're going to touch on that in the postmortem. But for now, let's just focus on converting this fully before I simply lose on time, which has happened before. We get queen d6 in this version. I mean, there are tons of tempting moves here. I think I'm going to choose to take here. I already regret my decision. It's okay. This or this. Okay, I'm gonna keep my rooks together. And keep this bishop defended. Bishop a6, king g2, I didn't see anything. So now I'm threatening bishop a5. Once again, we humans like things clear. So that I can take here. There's also queen b5 maybe, okay. Let me clear my thoughts here. I'm gonna go queen h5, keeping queens on the board. I want to see if I can completely complete the kingside attack. Because I technically do have an extra bishop and... Sorry, 2 minor pieces, I forgot about that. So I'm gonna keep queens on the board. Check. Kind of forces white to go c4 because stepping over here runs into knight e5, which would be check, and I would be winning the queen. So c4. I'm gonna take on b4. I'm expecting something like rook b1, and then I have a unpleasant surprise for my opponent. There's also another unpleasant surprise against bishop d6. There are many unpleasant surprises, and actually that's not a coincidence if your opponent is down 2 minor pieces, then only natural. So there we go, and this is the surprise I was talking about. Queen takes d6. Obviously, I am sacrificing the queen, but there's this very cute tactic at the edge of the board. Difficult to visualize just because of that same reason. But it turns out to be working completely, and on top of that, to make things even worse, to add insult to injury, as they say, I'm winning the rook. So now it's all about... I have tons of material. Now it's all about converting. I'm gonna push the pawn on h5, creating a passed pawn. My bishops are so strong. So I'm simply going to push. And I do have 10 seconds. But it's all under control. Don't you worry. So H. Let's keep pushing. I'm going to threaten. E4 seems like a only move. I'm going to push F5. Sooner than later we should be delivering some sort of mate here. Double check, and bishop c8 is mate. There we go. Thank you for the game, Nikolai. So let's take a look at the questions first. I think after knight c5, what is worse, but maybe he can play e4 at least, maybe going a g... Yeah, definitely there was something better to be done. It's still not the end of the world, but d takes e5 is, I think, the beginning of White's problems, although obviously the engine continues to claim this is zeros, but from the human perspective, I don't see any reason to take. Now, as soon as I said that, this is the curse of being a chess teacher, I guess. It turns out that someone has played this, and it's the main line, according to the opening book, so... Okay, God knows. God knows. Like, in my eyes, it seems like a mistake. It makes more sense to go for a4. And the engine, to be fair, although it's very low depth, but the engine does like a4. But okay, d takes e5 is the second engine move, so... It looks weird in my eyes. Maybe it makes sense as long as you follow it up correctly. And the engine is... Actually, the engine thinks White continued fine. But bishop d3 was wrong. So White's first critical mistake, or you could argue first actual mistake, because nothing before that was anything serious, was bishop d3. And bishop d3 simply allows either knight ec5 or even f5, according to the engine, or even knight takes c3, which we didn't want to calculate. It was a practical decision. We had 3 minutes, and knight ec5 seems like a simply good move. So yeah. And no, they did have bishop e2. e4 I think would have been making things worse. I think it actually runs into some tactics. Like, for example, obviously queen takes c3 this, but rook takes e3 obviously better. Wait a second, what am I saying? Bishop takes e4. So yeah, this is running into different problems. After rook c7, it's completely lost, but we're gonna go through that. Didn't see the d6. Yeah, d6 is bishop d6. It's nice to see that because it simplifies. Now let's take a look at what white could have done. Bishop e2. I was going to play bishop e4, and then I was expecting queen c1, and then, yeah, we simply have a slightly better position. We play h5 with the idea of h4 and slowly improve our position. Once again, this is a very static, long-term planning type of game. So we're not going to do anything drastic. There's nothing is going to happen for a long time until someone decides to do something. But very often in these positions, whoever decides to do something is actually the one that ends up in a worse position because of that same reason. They didn't understand that this was a long-term, slow-burning game where you have to planify and improve your position little by little. So they become desperate and impatient. That actually is what creates weaknesses in their position. So I think this is more or less what happened. Like b4. This is such an anti-positional move, and like even if it wasn't falling into takes and e4, like b4 is a very anti-positional. Okay, I mean, I understand, like it was tactical. It's heavily tactical because my opponent was, I guess, expecting 96, sorry. I don't know. b4 is not a very good move. And then after this, it's simply worse. So queen g5, bishop g3 we took, and rook takes d7 is kind of the logical response here, after which I can go bishop e4, I can take on c3, and we would win the game eventually. But they go queen d3, and now rook c7. Yeah, I should have gone 95 right away, exploiting the same idea of this bishop being incapable of taking. And at the same time, obviously, defending our rook. So this is doing this with... It's defending the rook with a tempo. Much better than simply moving it away. Now, there was this very nice line after queen d6, and that's bishop e5. Because once again, this can't be taken. And it's just game over. So this, 95, and then... After a while... What was the question here? There was some queen g4 stuff. Oh yeah. h4, queen g4. Oh yeah, I see. Okay. Fair enough. Cheetah is sending us a challenge as he or she has been doing for 1,000 years actually. It's quite historical actually. I think it does that with every single stream. Okay, well, there we go. And yeah, bishop d6, queen takes d6, and this is falling into the trick. The other trick we're talking about is rook a b1, which is knight d2 check. And white has to lose the exchange in one way or another. Thank you for the game, and I think that takes us very close to the end of the stream. We're gonna have time for one more game. But so far, interesting games. I think that line with the white pieces is very beginner friendly. It's worth taking a look at that. I think if white had played a little bit more patiently and not gone for bishop d3 stuff, then things would have worked out. So a Venezuelan is currently dominating the arena, followed by a Russian, a French, another Russian, and a couple of anonymous players. We're going to play against the 2200, well, 2150. Good luck. This is the highest rated player so far. So black plays c5. We're going to play knight f3. As we've been doing so far. Good night. Thanks for stopping by. I'm not sure if you remembered from last stream, but thank you for the donation as well. I really appreciate it. Very kind of you. But okay, Stefan, let me think for a while. 2300 blitz. So here it's very important to go bishop b5 check. If not, black gets short castles. For example, if I go rook e1, short castles, and then I have to play some like bishop f1, but I get to move the bishop away from the e file in order to defend the pawn with rook e1. And then I get rook e1, right? And if against bishop d7, I would have taken and played rook e1. So it's a little bit quicker. I'm saving a little bit more time. Well, I would have to take a look at your games. I would have to take a look at, I don't know, 1,000 things. Like your how often you do puzzles and or calculation exercises in general. It's dangerous to give away simple advice because, yeah. All I can say is if you're enjoying it, definitely choose quality over quantity. So play a rapid game and analyze it properly rather than playing 3 or 4 blitz games. And definitely stay away from bullet. And that's my advice. Okay. Now, castle short side, black went for knight bd7. I think I should have made a distinction here. There's knight c6, there's knight bd7, there's bishop d7. Those are the 3 main moves as far as I'm concerned. My opponent chose knight bd7, which is auto pinning temporarily. I played rook e1, defending my pawn. Black castle short side, and now it's white to play. It's our go. And we're simply going to occupy the center with d4. So white has a little bit more space than black. And black has to choose how to continue. So something that I've met before is e5. Sometimes people go for this. Black sometimes includes a6 in between. Black sometimes moves the queen. Black sometimes goes e6. This is what experience tells me so far. In regards of what we want to do, I think e5 is in our cards. Now black takes on d4. They break the tension. I'm going to take back. Once again, this is the reason why we play c3. It wouldn't make sense to take with the knight. And now they go a6. Okay, so I'm not sure why they took on d4 before going a6. Maybe they were scared of bishop takes d7, but that doesn't make sense. Like if they had played a6, bishop takes d7, simply knight takes d7 back, and I'm not taking on in c5 because black simply takes back. So a6 is played. Now the question is, where should we put our bishop? If I put it on d3, all of a sudden e5 may be a little bit more annoying. Because d5, knight c5, and my bishop is attacked, so I have to spend one more tempo. Bishop c4. Now, bishop d3, e5 takes is also an option, but then my bishop on d3 is blocking the queen. So if I'm going to take on e5, I would rather having that bishop away from the d file. What is that bishop doing in the d file? I would like to put a rook on the d file, or at least not have a weak bishop on d3, which is potentially in the line of fire. So yeah. Now bishop c4, e5. Now I think taking is a little bit more logical. I'm playing something like knight c3. That looks very natural. So I think I'm going to go bishop c4. This is a very active move for active diagonal for the bishop. Now black may want to go bishop at b5, and I am giving them the chance of going for this with a tempo. But I'm not completely devastated by that. Another way of approaching this position, which maybe was better, was bishop d3, e5, d5, knight c5, and simply accepting the bishop's fate and playing h3, which I think is more important to stop bishop g4 than to save this bishop. And after knight takes d3, queen takes d3, assuming my opponent doesn't keep the tension in that position, if you're visualizing it, then I can play bishop e3, knight d2, and should be a fine position. But okay, bishop c4, there's no way this is wrong. I'm simply going to move back. Once again, this bishop, the point of this bishop c4 move is to keep this bishop in the diagonal. And let's see. Slicks Football, thank you for subscribing. I'm glad that is working. As in many openings, after a6, b5, white can strike and undermine the queen side with moves like a4. So that's part of the plan, or it could be part of the plan at some point. If I had to say, if I had my move again, if it was my turn again, I would already consider playing e5. But okay, on that note, black is playing e5 themselves. Once again, we have different ways. We have 3 ways of dealing with this. The first one is actually not doing anything and not dealing with it, which is keeping the tension, playing a neutral move like knight c3, and continuing with our lives. The second one is taking, breaking the tension immediately, and the third one is actually advancing. Every single one of them is pretty reasonable, so let's try to figure out which one's the best. D takes e5 seems like this is my first intention, my first reaction. Because after d takes e5, it's simply, taking, and it's my turn again. So it's kind of the quickest. But what I don't like is that, I don't know, it opens things up. Like d6 is a weakness, right? Like after knight c3, for instance, if he takes d4, I can take with the queen, and then d6 is under serious pressure. And I like that, obviously. So d takes e5 gets rid of that weakness. d5 doesn't get rid of that weakness, but it does allow black to go knight c5. And even though after bishop c2, once again, we do have space advantage, but I don't know, bishop g4, black is getting to exchange a minor piece, and that's a big deal. If I knew for a fact that I can avoid black from playing bishop g4, then maybe I would go for it. But d5, knight c5, I'm a little bit annoyed that after bishop c2, there's bishop g4. So maybe I should go once again h3, but then they're taking on e4. So oh my goodness. I had a brain mix up. I was actually going to say, let's go for knight c3, but for some reason I went for d takes e5. Okay, it's not such a big problem, I guess. D takes e5 is probably the lesser. Okay, they take with the knight. Interesting. I think taking with the... After taking with the pawn, I think bishop e3, white continues to have some slight advantage, although after bishop b7, there's no way. Probably black is absolutely fine. Now they take with the knight, and that seems a little bit wrong. Let's try to figure out why. I mean, for starters, like the d6 pawn continues to be alive. So I think I can simply keep the tension. Oh my goodness, what am I doing? Allowing bishop g4. Okay, now I'm in some trouble. I have to move on to equalizing moves. Yeah, I should have probably taken on e5 or played something else, but bishop g4 happens. And let's see, what's the best way of doing this? There's bishop g5. There's bishop f4, there's rook e3, but rook e3 doesn't do anything. There's h3, but then knight takes f3 and then bishop takes h3. Potentially. I'm gonna play bishop f4. Kind of saying, look, if I get the chance, I'm gonna save my king side from getting completely destroyed. Yeah, my pawn structure. This is the most we've been in trouble in a while. So we have to keep things under control here. We have to focus here. Okay, they took on f3. I'm gonna take back. I don't have any other moves. And they go knight h5. This is very natural. So I'm gonna play bishop g3. I don't wanna go this way. Although maybe there's some logic behind that, but okay, I prefer to go bishop g3. And I'm expecting queen f6 or queen g5. So let's see how we approach this position. We're slightly worse, if not much worse already, but I think it's still within rescuing territory. So they go queen g5, very logical. So they want to get knight f4. And obviously my bishop is pinned to my king, so I can't take on f4. After this, one of the first moves that come to my mind is king h1, simply getting out of the pin. There's also knight d5, which is more active. That seeks to go for f4. So I think I'm going to go knight d5. This makes a little bit more of an active impression. It's more active looking, it's forward facing, and it threatens f4. Because after knight takes f4, there's knight takes f4 now. So let's see what our opponent plays. Actually, my opponent all of a sudden has to play accurately, I think. Knight takes g3 is nothing to worry about, because I take with the pawn. And all of a sudden my pawn structure is not as bad as before. If anything, my king is pretty safe. But I'm simply going to take back. f4 is still something to address. They go knight c4. And the question now is, should I defend b2? It's attacked twice. I was going to say, should I defend it with rook e2 or should I take? But it seems like we have to take, given that rook e2 actually doesn't defend it. So that's not amazing news. That's not amazing news at all. Okay, well, let's take and play rook c1. This seems like the way to keep things flowing. It's doing two things. It's attacking c4, counter-attacking, I should say. And it's also emptying the diagonal, so maybe b3 is going to be possible later on. Although the sacrifice of b3, bishop a1, queen a1 would have been very interesting. I was trying to calculate that, but for practical reasons, I'm not gonna explore those possibilities. So rook c8 looks like a very natural move, but they go rook a b8. Interesting. To take on b2 not with the bishop, but with the rook. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And now what do we do? I like my position, believe it or not. But how do we continue? f4, queen d8. That f4 is actually forcing queen d8. Pretty interestingly. You know, I think I want to go... I have to speed up. I don't want to activate the rook, or allow my opponent's rook to activate, I should say. So what should we do? I think I want to go b3, but should I tuck in f4? Hard to actually judge. I'm going to play b3 right away. I think I should have played f4. I just got a little bit scared of f5. f5 here I'm not too scared of because I simply keep things under control now that I can still take back with the pawn. But okay, I think once again, very hard to judge all of this. You definitely need more than a minute. So rook c8 makes sense. I don't think it's falling into any tricks with 97. Unfortunately for me. But it could potentially be allowing some knight b6, knight c4 ideas after rook takes c8. Either way, I'm trying to figure out a way of figuring out a way of I don't want to take, but I think I have to. I wanted to play king g2 right away, but rook takes c1, queen takes c1, queen takes c1, rook takes c1, rook takes b3. I don't think I had enough compensation, but now I have a good knight against potentially a bad bishop. I mean, I wouldn't say this is a very bad bishop because it is in a very active diagonal, but that diagonal is not hitting anything. So that's good news for me. Let's try to reroute our pieces and attack d6. That's kind of our plan now. And again, I think our king is actually pretty safe. So let's see how this pans out. So the idea is knight e3, knight c4. But I can also bother black with moves like queen a6. I was expecting that move, rook c1. So now my rook is in the open file. Black can't go back for reasons that we can touch on later on. Okay. Oh, they fall for it. Rook takes c8. I didn't want to say it in case my opponent was listening to the stream. Thank you for the game. Well, it actually ended up a little bit more drastically than it looked like. My opponent gave a very good fight. Thank you for the game, Marco. Totor. So it turns out that we have a slight advantage now. Let's see what happened in the middle game. I think everything made sense in the opening. We play c3. This is known as the late Alapin, as we've said already in this stream. Game 1 went like this, although it didn't go d6, it went g6. But it's still the late Alapin. So I should have also mentioned that bishop e2 is not blundering the pawn on e4 because there's this trick. You have queen a4. So g6 castle short side, once again black can't take because of the same trick. And now we go bishop e5. Now the black is threatening to castle, we have to do something about the pawn on e4. Now, technically you can still play rook e1 and continue to undefend this. But the problem is that after castle short side, bishop e5 is no longer giving a check, so you're not getting any tempo. You would have to go something like bishop f1. So bishop e5 check. It's not like it's gaining a tempo. It's essentially getting rid of the bishop with in exchange of a piece. So knight c6 or bishop d7. Black does get to exchange pieces. But okay, rook e1, castle short side, d4, and now we got this middle game where I think black should have gone a6. And this is actually what the engine thinks. Bishop f1 and then go b5. This makes a little bit more sense, although there's a4. So maybe c takes d4, c takes d4, and then b5. There we go. Because now a4, there's bishop b7. For some reason, if you keep these two pawns alive, after bishop b7, then e5 is a little bit of a problem. More than without these pawns. So definitely tons of theory, I'm assuming, and tons of ideas in this middle game. But yeah, black should have gone for a6. But after takes, and a6, I think this is a slightly better position. Although we go wrong and we go bishop c4. Yeah, this is one of the moments where we really tried getting things right. Bishop d3 happened to be the best move. And bishop f1 is a very close second. Bishop d3 we rejected because of e5. But after d5, knight c5... Yeah, actually, we actually calculated this. So what we did wrong was actually evaluating correctly this position. After bishop g4, I thought that after h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, black is fine. Because black gets the pawn on c5 and black managed to exchange one pair of minor pieces. And in many openings, whenever the side that is struggling in space gets to exchange a pair of minor pieces, that seems like a very big deal. In many openings, that means the side with the space deficit equalizes. But this is an exception. Very balanced. Black is not lost, but white continues to have some plus. So I should have gone for this. Although just to end this whole argument on a last note, it does seem like a little bit easier to play with black, because white is kind of keeping things under control, and only after that they can enjoy their advantage. But in the meantime, black is going to pose tons of questions, and that actually happens that's essentially the King's Indian in short words. Like you get to struggle, but on the other, like you have tons of counterplay. Now, if I saw that correctly, I think I saw Julio Ocio, and if I think that's the right person, Thank you. Espero que te esté yendo bien. Y gracias por la suscripción. But I may be wrong. Sí lo sabía. Igualmente. Espero que estés bien. Tengo que empezar a hacer videos en español. White has to play on queen side and black eventually pushes f5. Exactly. Counterplay along those lines. Yeah, definitely black's playing bishop g4 from black's perspective seems like a big deal. Although the engine, I mean, it's very low depth, but the engine seems to struggle finding bishop g4. That's probably the only time where the engine struggles more than humans. Closed positions. That's why the king's engine remains a doable weapon, despite the engine just saying, "Look, this is horrible." But yeah. Instead of that, we went bishop c4, we allow b5 with a tempo, and now black is completely fine after bishop e7. e5 is a mistake though. And this is funny. So we were about to play knight c3. And this would have actually been a mistake. Oh, I mean, slight inaccuracy. We actually went for the right move for the wrong reasons. I actually just completely confused things and went for d takes e5. But this is actually the right approach. After d takes e5, bishop e3, which we were going to play, once again for the wrong reasons. This wasn't my plan from the very beginning. It turns out we were absolutely fine. Knight c3. And okay, it's equal. There we go. Okay, it's equality. So there doesn't seem to be any way for white to get an advantage after bishop c4. We should have gone either bishop f1 or bishop d3 for a slight plus. But bishop c4 is already resigning the chances of playing for a slightly better game. And knight c3 is simply blundering bishop g4. This was embarrassing. I should have taken and played knight c3. But yeah, I blundered bishop g4, and then, yeah, luckily for me, it's not as bad. And queen g5 is actually a mistake. Black should have played g5 and clamped down on the f4 weakness. But yeah, once again, queen g5, knight d5, and now white is slightly better, and after taking on g3, white is much better. And just to speed things up, all of this is correct. e3 is slightly wrong. I should have gone f4 and then rook e2. But I went b3, white continues to put pressure, rook takes e8 is correct, king g2 is fine. Rook d1 is slightly soft. According to the engine, rook b1 with the idea of b4 was better. But rook d1 is fine. Then rook b8, rook c1 is strong, and rook c8 is obviously, and unfortunately, falling for this. Well, thanks everyone. I think that's gonna be it for me. Let's pause this before I forget. But instructive games, I think the last one was a little bit tense. We were in trouble for some part of that. But yeah, thanks everyone. I hope to see you next Wednesday, and hopefully this was instructive. See you guys. Thank you.